It's been almost a year since I switched to an iPhone. The journey began with the 13 Pro last November, and just a few months ago, Apple launched the new 14 series, and I upgraded to the iPhone 14 Pro right away, just to see what the hype was all about. Most of it was rolling around the new dynamic island, the new camera system, the A16 Bionic chip, and the always-on display. Now, I'm here to share my experience with you guys, and hopefully help you decide if it's a worthy upgrade over the 13 Pro, or if you're shopping around for a new smartphone during the holiday season. Now, from a broad perspective, the iPhone 14 Pro is all about incremental upgrades compared to the 13 Pro. The build quality is still one of the best that you can find on a smartphone. The form factor is exactly the same, which I love. The flat display, along with the boxy design, makes handling a breeze. It's compact, and it can be operated comfortably with just one hand. The back still features a matte glass finish that does a really good job resisting fingerprints, but I do find the stainless steel frame a bit distracting since it quickly becomes a fingerprint magnet, which then results in a slippery surface. So ultimately, just like everyone else, I ended up throwing a case on it and calling it a day. Keep in mind that the space black model is slightly darker than the graphite 13 Pro, but you'll only notice that in certain lighting conditions. The same goes for the stainless steel frame. If you're looking to add some color to your everyday carry, Apple does offer the 14 Pro in deep purple, gold, and silver. These are limited options compared to the 13 Pro, but hopefully they'll roll out a few more colors in the next few months to stay in the news cycle. Now, for our fellow Americans watching this video, Apple did remove the physical SIM card slot on the 14 series. International models, including my unit from Canada, will still support physical SIMs, and I know that some of you might think that it's a big deal, which is completely okay, but I believe that eSIM is the future. Now, here's a little story. Recently, I traveled to Europe and was looking for a local carrier that supports eSIM. All I did was order one online in Canada right before my flight, scan the QR code through the settings, and I was off to the races. It just saved me a ton of time, and moving forward, I just don't have to worry about carrying SIM card removal tools if I'm traveling international. It's just easy to transfer from one phone to another phone, and it can store multiple SIMs at the same time. Keep in mind that eSIM isn't anything new. It's been around for years, and it's still supported on older iPhones. I just think that this push to eSIM from Apple could very well be the new normal in the next few years. They've also packed the 14 series with some safety features like crash detection and the ability to connect via satellite in case of an emergency when you're off the grid. And I think these are cool bonuses, but keep in mind that satellite connectivity is only free for the first 2 years. They might start charging a monthly subscription fee after that. It's not confirmed yet, but only time will tell. Another thing that I noticed is the massive camera bump on the 14 Pro. I think it's due to the larger sensor with the new camera system, and it protrudes more than the 13 Pro, which results in an unbalanced and wobbly setup when you place it on a flat desk. I had a lot of trouble charging this phone wirelessly over my regular Qi charger, guys, because in certain orientations, this massive bump prevents the phone from making contact with the charging coils. So when I wake up in the morning thinking that my phone is fully charged, it's the other way around. So I had to spend more money to get a proper MagSafe charger to solve the problem. Now, don't get me wrong, MagSafe is dope. I still use it with my car accessories, and I absolutely love it. But boy, does it get expensive. You know, while we're on the topic of camera bumps and sensors, let's just dive right into the camera performance, because what Apple has achieved here is an incredible hybrid system that can shoot great photos and videos. First and foremost, there's zero shutter lag when you're taking photos like some other Android smartphones, Pixel 7 Pro. The ultra-wide angle camera boasts the same 12 megapixel sensor, but they have widened the aperture to let in more light, which does result in slightly better low light performance. Still, it isn't as sharp as Pixel's computational magic. That's just a whole other level. I will say that the field of view is adequate to get all your subjects in frame. When you give it more light, it captures all the details, but sometimes it just looks a little too processed when you examine the image closely. It's so fast to a point where I was able to capture this bug into the frame, which is pretty hilarious. The dynamic range also remains intact. Honestly, from my experience, the ultra-wide angle sensor performs similarly to my 13 Pro. You still have the option to choose the style of shooting, like standard, rich, contrast, vibrant, warm, and cool, but you'll have to dig in through the UI to get there. I have to say, the camera app is super easy to work with, but I just wish if it had a pro setting to manually adjust ISO, shutter speed, and white balance. I mean, Apple, just please add this feature. It's a Pro phone after all, right? Personally, I feel like the main camera got the biggest upgrade from the 13 Pro. The shift from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels results in much better detail as well as a natural, shallower depth of field when you're shooting subjects up close. I was also really impressed with the dynamic range and just the way how the sensor retains the shadows as well as capturing more true-to-life colors. It just doesn't look too processed like the 13 Pro. HDR processing is also really nice. Now keep in mind that by default, the sensor bins those pixels back to 12 megapixels to keep the file sizes relatively small, but if you're a pro photographer like I am, Apple also gives you the ability to shoot Pro RAW, which unlocks so much potential from the sensor. There's just so much headroom to work with those files, and that's exactly what got me excited every time when I pulled this phone out of my pocket to start shooting. Keep in mind that Pro RAW can chew through your storage very quickly since its average file size is 25 megabytes compared to 5 megabytes shooting JPEG. Low-light performance has also improved on the iPhone 14 Pro thanks to the photonic engine working behind the scenes. The larger sensor was able to freeze moments like this without causing any artifacts. Unfortunately, lens flare is still a known issue with iPhones. It's not a huge deal, but Android phones have addressed this already, so I guess it's just a matter of time for Apple to fix this. I'm not sure if it has to do with the type of lens that they've glued on top of the sensor, but yeah, for now, you just have to live with it. The telephoto camera was so much fun to work with, guys. On paper, the specs are exactly the same compared to the iPhone 13 Pro, and I was honestly really hoping for a bigger sensor like the Pixel 7 Pro or even the Galaxy S22 Ultra. But needless to say, guys, it's still an amazing focal length to shoot portraits and subjects with. Once again, the photonic engine does its magic behind the scenes by improving the color science and dynamic range, but I still feel like low-light performance could be improved a little bit. Now, you can optically zoom in 15 times, but it ain't as powerful as Pixel 7 Pro's 30x super res zoom feature. I mean, the range is far advanced on that phone, plus Google's software processing is one of the best out there. So I think Apple could learn a thing or two from this. Portrait mode has improved big time on this phone, and once again, I think this all has to do with the upgraded sensor and Apple's software processing within the new A16 Bionic chip working behind the scenes. It does a fantastic job with subject separation, and the best part is that it does all of this processing without blowing up the shadows or oversaturating colors. It's just perfect for my style of shooting. Now, I'll admit, I'm not a huge selfie shooter, but just for the sake of testing this phone, I tried it out and it's pretty good. You do have the ability to shoot at a wider angle to fit more subjects into the frame. It captures details really well, and I also noticed that it takes slightly better photos in low light compared to my iPhone 13 Pro. So that's the photography side, but what about video? Well, this is the part that absolutely blew my mind. Everything from HDR processing to the color consistency switching between the lenses to the built-in stabilization makes this phone the jack of all trades for content creators. Believe it or not, I shot some of my B-roll for the MacBook Air video on this phone and I was really impressed with the quality. This shot legit looks like I've hooked the phone up to a tripod, but that's just not the case. It's all handheld, good people. On top of that, Apple has added action mode, which uses software processing to eliminate vibrations and shaky movement when you're in a fast-paced shooting environment. I put this to the test, and once again, I was genuinely impressed. The stabilization literally mimics what you would get with a dedicated gimbal. It's just incredible to see this feature implemented on a smartphone. I repeat, a smartphone that's pocketable. Sure, it does crop into the sensor a little bit and it requires a lot of light to work with, so there are downsides to this, but to be honest with you guys, if I need any filler B-roll shots for my videos and if I need to get them done fast, I'm reaching out for the iPhone 14 Pro. It's just so damn impressive. So that's the story with the new cameras, but what else is new with this new iPhone? Well, there's a new dynamic island. Now, as much as we get a nice giggle when we listen to Apple's new marketing terms, I've got to hand it to them for creating something new. It's a welcoming change from the signature notch that we're used to on previous iPhones. You see, usually when you think about a notch or a hole punch cutout on a smartphone, you would think that it's a static placement that's solely designed for the cameras and nothing else. The designers at Apple, on the other hand, came up with a solution to merge the hardware that includes the TrueDepth cameras and the software that manages notifications to give you this beautiful experience when you're interacting with the UI. So if you receive a phone call, it expands to notify you. It also shows when your AirPods are connected, which is really cool. When my pods are running low on battery, it displays a little notification or a subtle reminder to charge them, which is super convenient. It shows when your phone is charging, Face ID animations look sick, and they just blend in really well with the UI. If you listen to music, it'll seamlessly morph into the background while you're in another app. And if you simply tap on it, you get quick access to playback controls without leaving your primary application. The app support for this integration is expanding, and from my end, WhatsApp, Spotify, and a bunch of other music streaming services work great. The APIs are also accessible for developers as well, so we can certainly expect more features in the future for the Dynamic Island. Bottom line is that I think this is a subtle and well thought out feature that benefits multitasking.
The all-new H7? What's not to like? It's like a perfectly tuned guitar or a sharpened knife, keeping the user happy and your hardware safe. The best part is the redesigned interior that is full of potential with 360 route support at the top and front, including 140mm mounts, a totally new cable management system and cable bar with of course vertical GPU support with this Gen 4 PCIe riser kit. The 3K styles are made to suit your needs, with the Flow being my favorite. I think this is the way to full tower your next build. Check out the new H7 when your heart desires.
The display on the 14 Pro has received a couple of upgrades. 120Hz ProMotion is still here, but Apple has implemented a new LTPO panel that refreshes as low as 1 Hz compared to 10 Hz on the 13 Pro. Now on paper, that should help extend battery life, plus it brings support for the new always on display feature. Now real talk, this isn't anything new, guys. Android phones have had this for years, and it was just a matter of time for Apple to finally bring this into the iPhone. Sure, it's a bit fancier this time since it has the ability to dim the lock screen wallpaper while highlighting key information like time, widgets, notifications, and other stats. But I found it extremely annoying at night. It was just way too bright and distracting when you have it mounted on a car or just have it sitting down on a table at home during the night. I just ended up disabling it after a few weeks and didn't look back. Now, at the time of making this video, Apple is working on a software update that lets you disable the wallpaper and notifications with iOS 16.2, so you'll only see the time and widgets down below. This is exactly what always on display should have been in the first place, and I'm happy that Apple is listening to user feedback. But I have a question for our Android audience. If your phone supports always on, do you have it enabled or disabled? Like, personally, I don't care about this feature, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Rest aside, this OLED display is great. The size has still remained the same at 6.1 inches, and I didn't notice a huge difference in quality compared to my iPhone 13 Pro, except that it gets much brighter outdoors, up to 2000 nits with auto brightness on, and I found that really useful when I was wearing sunglasses and interacting with the phone. ProMotion is still fast and fluid. I didn't experience any lags with third-party applications. I absolutely loved editing my photos using Lightroom, watching YouTube, and just doing smartphone things on this phone. On the other hand, battery life wasn't as good as my 13 Pro, and I found that really interesting even with the 200 mAh increase in capacity from the previous generation. Now, hear me out for a sec. I tested this phone with the always on display feature enabled, and that naturally drained the battery a lot faster than I expected, even with the newer LTPO panel. With it disabled, I was able to extend my screen on time to an average of about 6 hours, which is almost an hour less than what I used to get with my 13 Pro. Again, there are multiple factors that affect battery life. It could be the newer, brighter display that I used quite often to navigate through the city using maps, and the slightly power-hungry A16 Bionic chip that handles the Dynamic Island. Now, truth be told, you could get a day and a half worth of use if you're lucky, but if battery life is your ultimate priority, word on the street is that its bigger brother, the 14 Pro Max, is the current battery life champion. But I will warn you, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's really big. The built-in speakers sound great. You're still getting a stereo setup with the earpiece at the top and bottom-facing drivers. The output is strong, well-balanced, and good for casual listening. I've had no issues with call quality as well, and the haptic motor inside is just as strong as the 13 Pro. The software has also improved this time. iOS 16 is the bread and butter from Apple for this year, and it brings a lot of cool features to the table. First and foremost, they've opened customizability with the lock screen. You can now choose different font styles and set your desired colors, display a set of custom widgets, and just make it something different. You can also edit messages sent via iMessage, but keep in mind that it only works well when the receiver is using an iPhone. iMessage also comes with SharePlay support, so you can now watch TV shows or movies with friends and family virtually with playback controls. But unfortunately, it doesn't support Netflix and Amazon Prime, which I use regularly. Now, there are a whole lot of other features included with this version of iOS that requires its own dedicated video, but to sum it up, it's just refreshing to see some change. I've been messing around with some third-party widgets to make my home screen a little bit more unique, but I'll admit, I still miss Android and its superior customization over iOS. And of course, we can't forget about File Explorer. I mean, Android is just far advanced with that. It still sucks that I'm paying for iCloud storage because Apple is, for some reason, holding on to 5 GB of free cloud backup, which is just not enough for 2022. The notification system is just so weird with iOS 16. They now appear at the bottom instead of the top. And while you can change the layout from count to stack to list via settings, but I still find that I have to scroll up every time when I glance at my lock screen to view them, because otherwise I would think that I haven't received any. Honestly, this redesign completely defeats the purpose of notifications in the first place, and I really hope Apple fixes this with an update. By the way, iOS 16 is supported on iPhones dating all the way back to the iPhone 8. That's just crazy. I mean, name one Android smartphone since 2017 that can properly run, or can officially run, Android 13. I've got to give props to Apple for their strong software support. Now, past my minor criticisms with iOS 16, the iPhone 14 Pro delivers an incredible smartphone experience. But coming from my 13 Pro, I still find mostly upgrades as incremental. You know, it still doesn't feature USB Type-C, and I still can't believe that we're on this ancient connector. Battery life just wasn't as good as my 13 Pro. And from the outside, you won't find any major design changes other than the massive camera bump and the new dynamic island. I think this is probably one of the most key selling features of the 14 Pro. The A16 Bionic chip is fast, but for my everyday use, I felt like it was just as fast as the A15 Bionic on the 13 Pro. I think the new cameras deserve a lot of credit. Apple has seriously impressed me by a long shot with the video shooting capabilities, as well as a jump to a larger 48 megapixel sensor. As a content creator, this is an excellent tool that merges really well with my workflow. Should you buy it? Sure, if you're looking for the best iPhone on the market, but Black Friday and the holiday season is right around the corner, so you might save a lot of money getting the iPhone 13 Pro, which is still a fantastic phone. Oh, and by the way, at the time of making this video, there is a supply shortage for the 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, so good luck finding one. And on that note, thanks so much for watching. I hope you were able to take away everything that you needed to know about Apple's new flagship, iPhone 14 Pro. Let us know what you guys think about in the comments. I'm Ebro with Hardware Canucks. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. And please, spend responsibly.